Hello, is that loud enough? Good, good. So my name is Richard Pope. I'm going to be speaking about designing for tiny data, and what that is will hopefully become apparent in a short while. So it's no entirely sort of big news. The amount of data that exists about us is getting bigger and bigger by the day. Data about us, our work, our immediate surroundings, our future and our past activities. There's loads of apps that are all in turn generating more and more data all the time. That's hardly news. I've had a nagging feeling for a while, though, that we just don't have the design patterns and the tools to actually manage that data properly at the moment. Not on a human level, anyway. So I've been wondering, what do the digital assistants look like that help us navigate all the data that surrounds us? This isn't a totally empty field. There's a few apps like Google Now, Easily Do, Facebook, which I might come back to a bit later, but it's fairly open at the moment. So this is really a talk about 9 experiments I've done roughly over the last year or so about trying to make data make sense at a human level. I've referred to it as tiny data, which may or may not be a useful label, but think of it as a shorthand for simplifying data, thinking about how and where it can be displayed, how to summarize it, and how to filter it. So first example, this is the bicycle barometer. It came about because I was checking more and more things in the morning. I decided to get the tube to work or to cycle. Was the tube working? What's the weather doing? We've got a meeting, all that kind of thing. The barometer looks up weather conditions from the Met Office API. There's a 3-hour forecast you can look up, and the status of the Victoria line and my local tube station. It reduces all of those variables down to a single number. So if it's snowing, it goes one way, a bit more than if it's raining. Reduce it all down to a single number that then gets displayed on this dial here, and it points the needle more at the tube sign, more at the bike sign. It's powered by a Nanode, which is an Arduino-like board with an internet connection. It's actually really quite useful. It works. It hasn't even taken that much tweaking. Second example, this is the WikiCity125. I apologise for the pun in advance. This is a Wikipedia browser for when you're on the train. So it finds nearby Wikipedia articles as you move through the landscape. And it's weird because it literally only works if you're on a train. Well, not quite. If you're moving you're moving at speed in a direction. If you try to walk along using this, it's pretty useless. So the way it works is, as you move, new items appear on the list. You can click through. That should be moving. Why is it not moving? Anyway. You can click through to them. You can save them to Instapaper to read later. It uses an API called WikiLocation, which is something someone's made that scraped all of the Wikipedia articles, put a location on them. There's probably a different version of that if you're cycling or walking. That doesn't. Oh yeah. So the next one, food alerts. So this one takes the place you just shipped to on Foursquare and looks up the UK Food Standards Agency's website API and tries to do a match and find out what the latest inspection there said. So in this instance here, I checked in somewhere and it's saying 4 out of 5. You can see a bunch of other ones there. Regency Cafe, I always thought it was really lovely. 1 out of 5. Disappointing. So this is an example of giving you a small amount of data in a timely fashion. It's really interesting as well that lots of places you would think of being really swanky, like pop-up restaurants and gastro hubs, really not so. KFC, always really clean. There's possibly other reasons you wouldn't want to be in KFC, but that was me. So, number 4, Brixton Radar. So, this is the approximate area I think was local to me in my head when I think about where I live. Kind of wiggly line, I live somewhere in the centre there. It's about half a mile in size, but not equidistant in shape. This is an area which is undergoing a hell of a lot of change at the moment. Lots of breaches of planning and licensing, a bit of astroturfing, kind of fake community groups going on. Anyway, lots and lots of change going on at the moment. So, as someone who lives there, I want to be able to understand what's happening. So this is really an experiment in like total data surveillance for an area, thinking how much information you can get on the internet for a really, really small area of half a square mile. So far, it does planning applications, licensing applications, food safety inspections again. If someone edits a Wikipedia article in that area, it shows up. Still to add are if there's any new jobs, mentions of streets and council decisions, news stories mentioning particular streets again. It all gets fed through into Twitter feed. There's also a website that archives it all off as well. This is interesting because it's actually, the smaller an area you try and monitor, it actually becomes easier because you can spot individual names of strips and things like that. And the amount of data isn't overwhelming. If this was like 2 miles, you wouldn't be able to follow it on Twitter probably. It is just a Django app hosted on Heroku with a bunch of custom screen scrapers that goes and grabs the data and tries to make sense of it. So next one. In August, I signed up to do a 100-mile bike ride. 104 miles, in fact, and you have to climb 800 meters in the process. I haven't really been doing much training, really, at all. So I built this essentially as a guilt trip, but also to help me kind of understand. I know what my daily commute's like. I know how it takes, I know how long it is. I don't really know how that compares to 100 miles. I've cycled 50 before, never done 104. So this web app here does 3 things, really. First of all, left-hand side, it gives me a guilt trip telling me how many days there are left. Along the top is the number of days out of the last 7 that I've cycled. Supporting information. The most important bits are actually those 2 boxes there. So the box at the top represents the 104 miles, the box at the bottom, the 800 metres climb, and the little white block in it is how much of that equivalent I've done in the last 7 days. Not very much. Pull my finger out. The actual data, this is just a dumb front end. The actual data comes from a website called Strava, which you can use to record your cycles and record runs and things like that. And it offers an API where you can pull out this kind of data. Calendars. So of all of the data sources we rely on a daily basis, it seems like the one that has the least design love applied to it is calendars. We're just stuck in a lot of grids of boxes and meeting reminders and confirmations and all that stuff. I'm not saying this is necessarily the answer. This is a product of a hack day that Berg organised for their little printer application. And it logs into your Google Calendar and looks for keywords and tries to give you an approximate forecast of what's happening in the next 7 days. So things like if you're going to the cinema, I apologise for the icons are really, really crap. They're the best as I could find in an afternoon. If you're going to a gig, if you've got meetings, dentists, that kind of thing. So trying to give you an overall shape of what the week's going to be rather than just yet another list of 100 meetings. I had intended to do, but didn't get a chance to finish it for this event, was to try and do a phone call version of this. So you're a bit like the shipping forecast. So you get a phone call on a Sunday evening, like automatic phone call that phones you up and gives you the shipping forecast for your calendar for the week. So like meetings high, beer low, that kind of thing. Next one. So other than calendars, the other biggest offender in terms of lack of design love applied to it is agendas, I think, which are still things that live on A4 documents that get emailed to you, and everyone ignores them. So this was an attempt. I mean, this isn't really much in the way of, a tiny data set. It isn't even a data set. But so, what can you do to take an agenda and make it a bit more interesting and tell people what's going on whilst in a meeting? So if you see here, on the left-hand side, it's just effectively you can see more on the right-hand side what's going on. So you've got a list of agenda items, in this instance, tea bath, breakfast tea. And each word slowly fills up based on how much time has been associated with it. So the idea is that you could put this on a wall in a meeting, and everyone will have a slightly better idea of what they're supposed to be talking about, how much time they've got left to talk about it. So this one here, this came out of a conversation with a colleague of mine, Jamie Arnold, who was designing a system for managing lots and lots and lots of projects. And he said, I want something to display the data, to get rid of the problem of spreadsheet blindness. I want to display something. So I was like, what do you want to display? We can make something. He's like, I don't know, and it will change all the time. We have no idea. So the solution was this. It's not been used yet, but the solution was this. So we've got a whiteboard, which has got a bunch of surveys behind it with dials again, but the values come from a spreadsheet down the bottom there. So if you actually want to change what they're displaying, all you need to do is link one of those cells to a different place, different spreadsheet, and get a marker pen and write a new thing underneath the dial. So it might be one thing one week, another thing another week, but you've got some way of pulling that data out from endless spreadsheets into the real world. Then finally, it's good to finish on failure, so we'll finish on failure. This one didn't quite work. So as you know, like the London Underground now has Wi-Fi, which is kind of useful unless you're on free, in which case I don't let you on it, but useful for everyone else. This project was an attempt to see if you can use those Wi-Fi base stations as a proxy for location, because obviously GPS doesn't work underground. With the idea that then you could build something interesting on top of it, maybe something that gave you a snippet from Wikipedia telling you the history of a station, or you could collect stations, maybe. That didn't work. What I did manage to do was say whether you were on the tube or not. So I can write an API that says you are on the tube, you are not on the tube. That's what that one does there. That's good. Just because there's a pattern in the IP addresses. What you can't do is say you are at Victoria Station, because the IP ranges for Victoria Station change and overlap with Pimlico and all that kind of stuff. But there's something in this, definitely, of how do you orientate people when GPS is not available.
Look at MAC addresses instead.
Yeah, you could do that. That's beyond me, yeah. I'm only just a programmer, not a proper one. Yeah, there's still something in this. Right. So what did I learn from all these things? It's a good question. They are... I'll leave it to you to judge whether these things are in any way related. I think there are some threads that run through them, so... It's about the right amount of data delivered by the right medium. That might seem obvious, but it's so easy to chuck data on web pages and emails that we forget that sometimes. One thing it's helped me to start is start thinking about designing proper digital services, not just a website that sends out some emails or maybe sends like fully integrated cross-platform services. I think as there become more opportunities to display data elsewhere, then we need to start bringing that into our thinking when we're designing things. It's also underlined the fact that we're missing a way of doing notifications to devices unless you're running, unless you're building native apps. That's a problem that needs solving. Lots of things come down to helping you to discover, helping you to understand like the immediate future and the near past. So the two food examples are a good example of that, where one of them is telling you something you need to know it now because you just walked in somewhere, whereas the bricks and radar example was more, you're probably interested in this at some point in the future because you happen to live there. Similarly, the two cycling examples. One of them is about your immediate near future of leaving the house, the other one is a trailing period of 7 days. It's also underlined for me the importance of thinking about location in the way we think about locations. It's not just points, it's the sort of traces you leave as you move through the landscape. It's the fuzzy shapes we have in our heads when we think about locations. How do we design for those? A lot of it also comes down to understanding activity. So I mentioned earlier that Google Now and Easily Do as examples. They're building APIs that understand people's activities. Which is good that someone's doing that. I do wonder though if and where the equivalent open standards for those things are going to come from, open tools where I can build a service that asks, am I cycling, am I near a beach, am I in a park, am I on the tube? Because it feels... So I don't know if anyone saw Francis Irving's talk earlier, and he said that a lot of products and markets are kind of like one and the same thing, and actually it's about... It feels like what Easily Do and Google Now are trying to do at the moment is to work out what the new market is and own that, and it feels like there should be a kind of open response to that, maybe. So what's the OpenStreetMap equivalent for those APIs? Just a couple of final things. So it seems that a lot of the really interesting things are bespoke as well, which I'm not sure some of those reusable services can do. It really is the details of your exact locale or the transit system you use. I've also started to rethink what some of the so what we mean by personal data, because traditionally we've been really thinking about it's things about us, so it's our phone number, our address, our place of work, that kind of thing. But when we start thinking about personal data stores and the like, where do we think about storing the fuzzy shape that we think of as our neighbourhood, or the times that we normally cycle to work? Is that personal data? Should that be living in data stores that we can then give other people access to? And then finally, the other thing that all this has kind of taught me, after a fairly period of not making much stuff for a couple of years outside of work, it's suddenly got really easy and really fun. There's the fact that you've got frameworks like Django and Flask, CSS frameworks that handle a lot of the mobile stuff for you. Just makes it really easy and fun. So I'm going to keep on doing more.
Okay.